Good evening and welcome to episode 26 of Down on the Corner, the flagship show of KINER'S Tonight, we close out season one, believe it or not. I'm your host, Mark Rosenman. Tonight, I'm joined by KINER'S staff members, AJ Carter, John Coppinger, and Noah Glickman. Our guest tonight was a big part of the Brooklyn Cyclones since he first joined them in 2018. His ability to paint a picture with his words and tell a story helped him make the climb from Brooklyn to the big leagues as he joined Howie Rose in the broadcast booth this season. He is a native of Valley Stream, New York. It is an absolute pleasure to welcome Keith Raad to sport the Down on the Corner here, a seat on the corner. So welcome, Keith.
Thanks so much, guys. Good to talk to you.
So for those of you that are new to the Zoom room, which you guys that are here are not, obviously, reminder, we start off the show each week by asking our guests a few questions. We ask during that time, you keep yourself muted. We'll turn it over to you guys at the end to ask questions because you guys always ask much better questions than we do. You'll use the raise hand function or you'll do it old school and raise your hand. But as always, we ask that you keep your questions respectful, and we don't even have to tell you guys that because you do it each week. So Keith, I had a chance to congratulate you in person last month, but congrats once again. And we know your time is limited because of the event. So how's fatherhood going for you so far?
Well, yeah, fatherhood is 4.5 weeks old right now, and I could tell you I could fall asleep with the drop of a hat. So if it goes quiet here for a second, that's what happened. But it's amazing. It's amazing. My wife is you build a deeper appreciation for the women in your life. My wife Kate is a rock star. So finished up the season. Very happy to be home now to help out. And very excited to bring Charlotte into the world. Thank you for asking.
No problem at all. And I know probably at the timing, listen, there's a silver lining in the Mets not making the playoffs. But so we mentioned in the opening that you are from Valley Stream. You attended Chaminade High School. Then you turned that into a degree in communications at college at the University of Dayton. At what point did you know that this is what you wanted to do for a living? And who was your biggest inspiration?
Yeah, it took me until college that I realized what this was at all. I grew up watching the Mets, the Yankees, the Rangers, the Knicks, the Islanders. Everybody that we've soaked up for the last many years, Sam Rosen and Gary and Keith and Ron and Howie and Michael Kay, just growing up in this world of phenomenal broadcasters in New York. And by the time I got to college, I joined the radio station, majored in communications. I had no idea what I wanted to do. And then probably around freshman, sophomore year, I met some seniors who were really good at this, which is play-by-play. And I was the only young guy around. So they passed me the torch in Dayton. And I'll never forget my first ever broadcast that I did was a men's soccer game between Dayton and Richmond. And I was so terrible that afterwards, that phone call with your parents, your parents love you for everything. Even my own mother was like, listen, maybe you should find something else to do. It was that bad. So that was kind of the moment that I went, you know what, hold on a minute. I've listened to all these guys, these legends, guys and gals, I should say. And so let me get good at this. So I was almost trying to turn a negative into a positive. But my biggest influence through all of that, trying to find my own voice, was learning how to be conversational. And I think that Al Michaels has always been the guy that I strive to be like, just the sound. I always felt that I know he's on Thursday nights now, so it's harder to watch him. And he's a little grumpier on Thursday nights, I think, now too. But Sunday nights with Collinsworth, when I was growing up, it felt like you're sitting back, having a bourbon on the rocks, just chatting. And that's the kind of the vibe I always wanted to paint as a broadcaster.
Keith, I've been smiling this whole time because you and I are in the exact same boat. I am a young broadcaster as well at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, and I have to ask, what advice do you have for someone who may want to enter the field like me? And also, did you call basketball at all? Because I know that UMass and Dayton are in the A10 together. So I'm sure you may have been to Amherst.
Yeah, so I did call plenty of A10 Dayton versus UMass basketball. I never actually went to UMass. The only time I went to UMass was to visit. I almost went to UMass. It was one of the closer schools, 4.5 hours away. But yeah, my advice would be just work. That is two words that can be digested many different ways. We all know people in our lives that work hard. We all know those who pretend to work hard. And the whole reason that I was able to even sniff a conversation with really important people to get a job like this was because all of the work leading up to the tape you end up handing over, it's about 9.5 years times 100 some odd games times 100 times 9 innings of those games, and constant critique and reevaluation and sending out your stuff to other people who are really good and a lot better than you that could teach you what to do. And by doing that, by just working, you not only get yourself out there every day and realize that it's going to be hard, the whole 10,000 hours thing, but you also meet a bajillion people that can help you realize, hey, you're not good at this, so work on that, and vice versa. And people that continue to grow with you through organizations. For instance, you're at UMass. You have no idea who at school is going to be an SID somewhere that may get you a job broadcasting games, or media people that around a scrum that you end up, oh, I saw X, Y, and Z person, and you connect the dots. So by just working, you get out there and get it rolling.
It's so interesting because you mentioned you never know who you're going to bump into. And, David Stearns at his introductory press conference gave props to, the people in Brooklyn, in particular, Gary Perrone, for believing him in back there. You joined a Brooklyn Cyclones broadcast team, both you and Jake Eisenberg, both very young. Jake is now already with the Kansas City Royals. You're here in New York. But it's interesting because I think it's lost on a lot of people that the two of you are really continuing a rich history of Brooklyn broadcasters. Red Barber, Vince Scully, Connie Desmond, Ernie Harwell, and many others called games for the Brooklyn Dodgers. I'm just wondering, how much did you know of their history in the borough? And does it take a certain skill set to be able to succeed in Brooklyn as a broadcaster?
Absolutely. I love history. As a baseball broadcaster, I first of all have to appreciate and love the story of the game, but I also appreciate the people that have come before me and who really built the art. I mean, baseball on the radio, anything on the radio didn't really start till the 10s, 20s, and 30s after Mr. Marconi built the damn thing for us to use. And if you go back and listen to Red Barber or Vince Scully, you can hear a very, very pedestrian, very simple call of baseball and a gradual increase in the way it was delivered. And a lot of that started in Brooklyn with some legendary people. When I was there, my wife's from Michigan, and her family is a huge Ernie Harwell, just junkie family. In fact, at our wedding, her father, my father-in-law, he brought up Ernie Harwell's great, during Tigers games, a foul ball would go into the stands and he would say, oh, that's caught by a guy from Livonia, or that's caught by a guy from Farmington Hills. And my father-in-law as a kid going, how does he know who caught the ball? But he's just doing that to make a connection to the audience. And I think those little details that you pick up help you learn that there are people out there that need you. And who are those people? What is that community like? I've been in a couple of different minor league communities and cities, and they're all very different. Certainly Brooklyn is the most unique one of them. But Jake and we are very close, and we are very proud to kind of make it be on a list of broadcasters that came out of Brooklyn, even though obviously on a much smaller scale. We have to pick up the service time a little bit on our end before we start to reach that level. But there's old pictures of Ernie actually came back to Brooklyn in the early years of the Cyclones and called a half inning of a game, which is, I love that stuff. In the old picture of little Ernie getting old and coming out to a game. So yeah, there's no doubt that I appreciate some of those predominant voices.
Yeah, you talk about Ernie Harwell. I think to this day, it's still one of the greatest stories that was told when we were doing radio. Ernie Harwell was on, and he was telling us about back in the day, that they used to broadcast the games over teletype, and he used to make sound effects. And one time the teletype machine broke down, and he had to, delay. And he said, well, there's a slight delay at the game right now because a dog has gotten loose on the field. And he just described this thing about, the security guards are chasing the dog. And this went on until the teletype came back on. He gets home, and his wife goes, how did a dog get loose at a stadium? And Ernie Harwell goes, that never happened. The machine went down. I had to come up with something. It was just like, and the way Ernie speaks, like you could be entertained with Ernie reading like the Yellow Pages, but it was fascinating. But your time in Brooklyn gives you a unique perspective, as well as I would have to say an advantage that Howie on the radio side and Gary, Keith, and Ron on the TV side don't have, as you already have pre-existing relationships, as well as a really understanding of players like, Francisco Alvarez, Brett Batty, and Ronnie Mauricio, because you saw them in Brooklyn, at the beginning of their careers. What was it like for you to see them make the majors and to be able to call, them, from both ends, as a Brooklyn Cyclone and now as a New York Met?
Yeah, I've kind of tussled with the way to describe this because I kind of liken it to, if you have in high school, we'd have our favorite band and no one would know about them. And all of a sudden, a year later, they come out with a huge hit, and all of a sudden they're mainstream and everybody loves them. And you're going, screw you guys. I knew them when I was in a basement, there were 3 people around, but I say that to say that I saw the growing pains. There still are growing pains, but the real growing pains into big leaps as players. Beatty, Mauricio, and Alvarez were the trio that I had in my 3rd year in Brooklyn. The first year that we were full season after going from short season to high A, which is basically, of the 4 years of the minor leagues that are predominant, basically sophomore year, graduation is making the big league. So by the time they got to me again, I saw them for the second time, most of them. And a lot of the deep relationships that I had with guys were because I had them in 18 or 19, and then after COVID in 21 and 22. And so you just get to know them better. You get to know their parents. You get to see them strike out in the middle of a town that there's 8 people in the stands and nobody cares and nobody's watching. But you also get to see ridiculous talent and ridiculous power from some of these guys that you're going, okay, I know I'm seeing this. Other people have to see this too. So that's the coolest part to me, is that I got a chance to I only do 3 innings when we're at home, mostly with Howie. Just timed out that I did Ronnie's first hit and Ronnie's first home run. And I got some texts from people in Brooklyn, like, how did that feel? That's pretty cool, because, I saw him when he was 19, 20 years old. But I don't know why that's so cool to me. Everybody kind of wants to be there at the ground floor of something, but now it's so fruitful to see these guys come to the forefront in New York. The other ones that I will say, for instance, a guy that pitched for the Mets this year, Josh Walker, the guys that nobody really knows about, the fly-by-night, the next reliever up, the Grant Hartwigs of the world, Josh Walker is the guys that you don't expect to make it all the way are the ones that are the most impactful to, I guess, my love of watching the game, because Josh Walker was a guy who was a 37th round pick and forgotten about, and twice injured, got in a car accident. That was not his fault. His career was basically over, and he fights his way to the major leagues. The Beattys, the Alvarezes, the Vientoses are going to get there, and it's amazing to see them there. But sometimes the cooler, deeper, more emotional story of the guys that are forgotten about, I almost cut a few times, that end up making it all the way.
Now, with David Stearns at the forefront of the organization, and with your experience watching these younger players in Brooklyn, how do you think he can develop the younger players in order to have a brighter future ahead?
Yeah, so that's the big thing I think about Stearns that most Mets fans might not understand totally, and that's fine, is that certainly his job is going to be making sure that the guys that take the field at Citi Field are the best that he can find. But the president of baseball ops does everything, all the way down to Venezuela and the Dominican Republic and high school complex league stuff and scouting, international scouting. That whole philosophy, I think, will come from some model that David Stearns has come up with that will find the time of the I guess where the team is. And what I mean by that is what's working now. The rule changes, speed kills, power is still huge, pitching. He'll find a model that will adapt to whatever the game is and continue to teach that at the lower levels of the minor leagues. What I will say is that hitting wise, I think the Mets have done a pretty solid job with some hitters lately. I know in the past pitching has been big. I think the Mets can get better developing pitching down below. And Stearns has done a really great job of that in Milwaukee. So I hope that that philosophy, of whatever philosophy it is, I don't know what it is, and a lot of people may not know exactly what that model is. But I think if it worked in Milwaukee to produce talent with, I think this year they're the 19th out of 30th in terms of payroll. You're not a ton of resources. I hope he can build up the pitching, because that's Mets history too. Mets have always been able to pitch in their great years to go along with their already solid foundation of hitting.
Now, I detailed the advantages you had from coming from Brooklyn. I don't want you to take this the wrong way.
Go for it.
But you also come with 2 disadvantages. One is your youth, and 2 is you actually grew up a Yankee fan. And I think whoever comes up with the trivia questions, whether it be Madge or Ray Martell, have it in for you, because that's like one of my favorite parts of the broadcast, where it's a question of like the mid 60s Mets and how he's like, you can actually hear Howie's smile come over the radio when he knows you have no clue who it is, and he can't wait to educate you. So what's it like being the new kid on the block, as well as a totally different generation than all the other Met broadcasters, with the exception of McCarthy, but obviously Gary, Keith, and Ron, and Howie. What's it like?
Yeah, educate me, dunk on me. That's another phrase I like to use when we're talking about the trivia question. But yeah, that's my hazing. That's my hazing for the year, is to sit next to Howie and just get a lesson. And these questions are ridiculous because nobody can answer them except for Howie in the world, and he's the one that nails it every single time. So that's I mean, I shake my head. In the beginning, I was like, okay, I got to really, how can I come up with a great answer here? And I just said, who could come up with a great answer? Some of these questions are impossible. I mean, the 97 Marlins and Cleveland World Series, there were two Mets on the field. Who were they? I don't know. But a lot of that comes from, first of all, Howie was born before the Mets existed as a franchise. I was born in 1993, and he lived it. And when you live it, it's so much different than going back and reading. I could pull up the 1971 Mets roster and read it and try to study it, but it's not the same as listening to the games or being at the games or watching the games. And I get that. And Howie and I, we love that dynamic. There was a story that we just told the other day that I said on the air. I didn't realize, Howie, until I was about 10, that Tommy John, so we're talking about Tommy John surgery, he was a person. I didn't realize that till I was 10. And basically Howie dumped on me. Like, why wouldn't somebody, a baseball fan, want to know, who Tommy John is? I go, I was 10. When did you want me to learn this? 5? But that's the kind of stuff that I think fans have come to enjoy with us. And I'm a good sport with it. And Madge loves to stump. Obviously, he knows he's going to stump me most nights. But when he can stump Howie, that's his favorite. And you can kind of see that little sinister look behind his producer board back there when Howie's really foiled with something.
As the oldest person in this room, we started following the Mets from the first year in 1962. I appreciate the trivia questions to see the ones that I do remember and don't. Now, Joe Christopher passed away yesterday. I saw Joe Christopher play. The other part of the broadcast team is Pat McCarthy. And 2 questions about him and you in broadcasting. One is, he has a very different pedigree from yours, and his father actually was a Mets broadcaster. How different is it when you do the play-by-play games with Pat as opposed with Howie?
Yeah, I think it's 2 different vibes. And that's the thing with Howie that he brings to the table, that really, if you put him on any broadcast, any other place, you're not going to get the same type of vibe because he is such a wealth of knowledge. And I think my point of when I battle back and forth with Howie and Madge, just on the trivia question in general, and I say, listen, sometimes I play dumb because the audience loves when Howie has a little trail, a little nugget, and he just jumps on it and he goes down the rabbit hole of stories, and it's story time. Sit back and relax and listen. When the Mets are getting killed 21-4 against the Braves on a Sunday, the first game of a doubleheader, it's like, okay, Howie, what do you got? And let's go down that rabbit hole. So no one will ever come close to doing what he does, because again, he lived it. And in our preliminary conversations before the year started, I said that to him. I said, there's no way I'm even going to sniff anything close to Mets history like you. And he said, you don't have to. That's not what we're doing here. It's not a know-it-all show about Mets history. It's a baseball game connecting young and old together. So that's great. Now, when Pat and I do these games, they're different. I mean, for Pat and I, it's our first major league season that we've ever had full time. Pat's done a couple Phillies games filling in, but for us, we're learning on the job as far as what's expected of us. And what we are dedicated to is certainly trying to talk to every Mets fan as much about history as we can. We're not going to come close to Howie, but presenting the 2023 Mets story as best as we can, drawing on our own experiences, but also just trying to do the best job for the Mets fan. It's not to serve our own needs. It's to serve the audience's needs. We're not going to do it like Howie. We're not expecting to do it like Howie, but we'll try to come close to make it an entertaining broadcast.
Does anybody talk to you, or does it just work by saying, we want to bring in a new generation of Met fan listeners? You're obviously a younger, different generation, you and Pat. Did anybody talk to you consciously about that? Here's what we're trying to do. We want you to appeal to a younger audience.
I would say that I think it's no doubt. I mean, for instance, I was a little bit shocked to get the job. I'm sure people were also shocked to find out that I got the job too. But I think part of the job was, being a New Yorker, being in the Mets organization, knowing those two things really well, and then, being in an audience that is attractive to, growing things for any kind of product. I mean, you always hear, how is this such and such product doing with 18 to 35-year-olds? That seems to be like the number one thing, because once you get that group in, you've got them for life. You've got them for 36 to 44 and 45 to, that kind of thing. As part of just adopting and adapting radio in general. I love radio. I don't, terrestrial radios have decreased big time, where it might lose AM signal over the next couple of years. You never know. But I think on the app, people listen to the MLB app all the time, the Odyssey app all the time. Absorbing baseball on basically an audio only radio style, I don't think will ever go away for that sport in particular. But I think when you get a 30-year-old and a 28-year-old in there, you're trying to see what new audience might join the other audiences of people that are older and people like Howie Rose.
Now, AJ is a huge scorebook guy. And I know you, as well as several other play-by-play guys, swear by the Bob Carpenter scorebook. Many fans who watch the Mets on SNY know Keith's system with the different colors on his scorebook. What is it about the Carpenter scorebook that you like, and why do you use it? And could you fill our audience in a little bit about what it actually is?
Sure. So don't tell Bob this, but I stole his scorebook and I changed it for myself. So don't tell him that. No, Bob's a great guy. That's the first model you need is a broadcaster scorebook. First game I ever did was, I think, a Dayton softball game in junior year. And I just grabbed, the scorebook that my dad had when we played softball. And he said, here, you're on the book tonight, F7 and L6, this kind of thing. But there's no room to put in any notes. And the broadcast scorebook allows you to do that, allows you to basically see the game as a manager would see the game. That's what Keith Hernandez, I think he stole it from Whitey Herzog, if I'm not mistaken, because he said, Whitey, I need to know who's in your bullpen. I need to know who's on your bench. I need to know X, Y, and Z. What do you have? Let me copy it. And so basically all we want to do is think like a manager, so we could present the game with as much knowledge as humanly possible, but also have a little bit of space to come up with our own things as far as the layout of the book. And it's basically your brain on paper. That's all it is at the end of the day. Bob's does an amazing job. When I say I stole his book, I just kind of tweaked a couple of things that I liked and didn't like. I know Howie swears by the Bob Carpenter scorebook. Other people have different ways of doing it. Everyone scores differently. It's a different language. But it's basically your brain on paper. And I do it differently than Howie does. But at the end of the day, it's whatever gets your brain in a comfortable mode to look down and look for something quickly, whether it's a note for that day, a story that you wanted to get in, league rankings on certain players. I have I write down a guy's stat line that gets me comfortable to know what kind of season that person is having from a couple of stats: home runs, average home runs, RBIs, doubles, triples, stolen bases, and maybe one or two other things. And again, it's just your brain on paper. It's not the end all be all. We write things down that 90% of the time we won't use, because ground ball down the left field line and here come 2 runs and we got to focus on the game. But it's always there for you when you have nothing to say and it's 7-0 in the third inning and you're going, all right, let me see here. What did I write down before the game?
So Mark and I coached 2 youth baseball teams in a tournament in Fort Lauderdale in August. And I had a book and I said, okay, I turned to one of the parents. I said, I'm running the team. It's like the under 14s, the under 16s. Can you keep the book for me? And they gave me a lecture. Why do you have to keep a book? There's this app called Game Changer. Why don't you keep everything in Game Changer? Did you ever look into any sort of an app that would replace the book, or you just love the book and you want to keep it? By the way,
this is a great discussion. This is a great discussion. I think my buddy Jared Sandler, who does some Texas Rangers radio, he does the book, which is the iPad that basically is a book, and it'll be that particular square, right? That hitter's square, what they're about to do, and he'll write in big letters on his iPad what happens in that square, and then the square will minimize and just jump into the book and then move to the next square. And come on, Jared, let's get old school here. That's how I feel about it. I talked to Gary Cohen about this. I think we were in Miami about that because I think Pat's dad Tom with the Phillies, Pat McCarthy's dad Tom McCarthy, he prints out his book every day, which preloads stats, so you don't have to write down every statistic. And myself and Gary both, come on, because the kid that makes the study guide, who writes in every single note and nugget, knows it more than just kind of getting a printout reading. So I think I find the doing a book every day in pen and in cursive, which Pat thinks is even more old school. I write in script in my book. It's therapeutic. It's therapeutic for me to get ready to do the game.
All right, we're going to pivot a little bit because I know you're short on time. We had storyboarded something different, but the beauty of this show is allowing the audience, the people that have been really, really good all year long in our group on Facebook, as well as on the show. We're going to open it up for them to ask some questions. And after, when you have to go and take care of your father duties, what we'll do is we'll recap the Met season. We'll kind of act like therapists here for a while. So, all right. So the first person up is Jeff Cohn. Go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Keith, for joining us. I really enjoyed your work over the season. I actually have two questions. You work with you said you wanted to model yourself after Al Michaels, but you have access to one of the greatest broadcasters' grandson in the world. So have you ever talked to Colin Cosell about your about broadcasting?
Yes, and I will say when I was in college and I was kind of a man on an island in Dayton, Ohio, I my first thought was Al Michaels is my guy. So I've as I come closer to New York again, and I'm in the room with Howie Rose is my guy. Or if I'm in the room with Gary Cohen's my guy. But Colin's terrific too. He's another guy that wants to carve his own path. As far as even I'll say the same thing about Pat. When you have a parent who does this, and you got the job, and you're in the business, everybody says, "Hey, you're Howard Cosell's grandson," or "Hey, you're Tom's son." And that's cool. They love that, but they want to be Colin, and they want to be Pat, and they want to do their own thing and be their own person. So, but Colin loves the history of his grandfather. I'm pretty sure he was about 6 or 7 when Howard Cosell passed away, but you could see it in his face a little bit that he's a Cosell.
Oh, he does a great impression of his grandfather. And number two, how's your Seinfeld education coming along?
Oh man, I'm not going to lie. I think I got Howie beat on Seinfeld. It's a secret, but I started watching Seinfeld heavily when I was about 7th or 8th grade in 2006 and 2007 with my whatever TV regimen I went home with after the end of middle school. And I would just 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and I'd watch TBS and I'd see back-to-back Seinfelds. So I've probably seen, my wife can tell you, every episode 20, 25 times. It's pretty ridiculous that I'll be doing the dishes, it'll be on, and she'll be watching, and I'll fill in the next line, and she's like, "I don't know what they're going to say. Stop telling me what they're going to say." But yeah, I love Seinfeld. Howie loves it too. We chuckle. There's only so much with a pitch clock too. We can tell stories. A lot of the fun and laughter that we have too melts to, hey, that was a 3-pitch inning. We dropped the headsets in the commercial break, and we finished the joke off the air because we've got to get it out. We've got to say it. So
nice. All right. I saw Larry was raising his hand old school. So we're going to go to Larry because I got to love a guy who does it old school. Go ahead, Larry.
How you doing? As a broadcaster, I know you probably dreamed of being a broadcaster as a kid. And you said Al Michael is your role model, but we know Al did baseball, but not a lot of baseball. So now you're going to college, you're trying to think of certain things to do. Your home run call. Is that practice? Did it change over the years? If it did change, how many times did your home run call change?
So that is a very interesting topic too. When you're coming up, or when I was coming up in college, going into the minor leagues, especially, a lot of guys that I would be around were from Syracuse, and Syracuse is a great school for broadcasting, and I would learn a lot from just watching them. And we always get into these topics of home run call. Those kids, and I kind of followed what they were taught because Dayton was not a huge program. They were basically taught every home run call is taken. Like, think about that. Every one of them is taken. All the good ones are taken. So stop trying to do something kitschy. So I never liked doing the one call and that's it, because if you make that one call whether it's 2-1 home run in the 8th inning, take the lead, or it's 15-0 in the 4th inning, you've got to say that call. I've never I try to never do the same thing twice. I would love to have one. I mean, Howie tells me about put it in the books, which is not a home run call, but it's a signature call, and how it took him a couple of months, years to perfect that. It has to happen organically. So I'm not discounting that I could have one, but I try to more paint the picture than kind of, not gonna say make it about me, because home run calls, when they happen and the same thing is said, Gary's, it's out of here. Everybody feels that's a home run. But a lot of them are taken if you think about it. So we all have to get creative. My generation of broadcasters have had to get creative with what to say.
So one of my favorite things on Baseball Reference, over and above the Immaculate Grid, is also the Oracle of Baseball, which is kind of the Kevin Bacon where you connect to people. And you mentioned Al Michaels, and it's interesting because there's a great connection between Al Michaels and you. A lot of people don't realize this, but Al Michaels and Jiggs McDonald broadcast, I believe it was the LA Kings in their first year of existence, radio side. And Jiggs McDonald, people do not realize, was a Met announcer on sports. It was at that point, I think it was called Sports Channel USA. And Jiggs did Met baseball for 1 year. So there you go. There's your connection to Al Michaels. One step to Jiggs McDonald. Michael, you have your hand raised. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So I got a kind of a different question. I grew up a Mets fan, and I was listening to the Mets on my transistor radio in 1969, glued to my seat as they played that last game of the World Series. Round in '86, around for all the playoff games. Went to a couple of playoff games with full stadiums. I can't imagine what it must be like for a broadcaster to walk into Rays Stadium when you have a playoff game and 19,000 people show up. I mean, is it at that point that it becomes, the business takes over and you have to self-motivate to bring out that broadcast when you're hearing echoes in the stadium?
Yeah, it's a shame. I mean, it really is. I was watching yesterday and a little bit today. It's a shame because the Rays are really freaking good and they deserve to have a great fan base. But we went to Miami the second to last week of the year. They're fighting for a playoff spot. We were there, I think, a Monday, Tuesday, and a Wednesday, and they announced, and whatever they announce, subtract 25% of what's actually in the ballpark. I think it was like 15,000, 12,000, and 10,000. And the place was empty. And this is a Miami Marlins team that is fighting for a playoff spot. Not amazing baseball team, but good enough from what, they've had in the past. And it was empty. And I remember turning to Madge and I'm going, doesn't this sound spooky? How echoey it is and empty it is. It kind of took me back to my minor league days, which if you listen to my minor league tape, there's 1,500 people in the background in Wilmington, Delaware. It's not quite providing that big league sound and ambiance. But it's a big difference when you put the headset on at Citi Field or at Yankee Stadium or the Dodgers, for God's sake, that draw 50,000 on a Monday. It's a shame what happens with the Rays, and the Marlins, unfortunately, we're in the same boat. And who knows if they'll even get a home playoff game? Probably not, to see what that would have done.
Interesting. And you mentioned the Tampa Bay Rays. I just want to throw this out in the room. If you guys have not seen it, maybe one of the best documentaries I've seen in the last 10 years. The Saints of Second Chances. It's about Mike Vick. Phenomenal. It's on Netflix, guys. If you can check it out. Sal, I think Sal is going to finally break his streak. Now, just so you know, Keith, Sal, no matter who it is, whoever we've had on each and every week, he has some sort of thing. I mean, he was bummed one night because Joel Youngblood had to cancel last minute. He actually had a subway card from the New York Transit Authority, like an advertisement for the Mets when the Magic was back, of Joel Youngblood. He's had something every week. Now this is going to be tough. So he's either had hats. So Sal, you've got your question, but I see you're only wearing a Met hat. I think 26 weeks, but I think we finally stumped you. What do you got?
Well, you thought you stumped me, Rosie, but
Oh no,
there's always Quacker Jack to show up, and the cup. You got to have.
Wow, there you go.
So We'll get to a game next year,
I'll give it to you, but yeah, I was looking for something from Dayton, but all right.
Well, how many weeks have we done this? I think pretty good.
26. Yeah.
Yeah,
All right.
I was with the Ducks in 2016, so that counts. I was part of my minor league story.
You did a great job this year. I was going to ask you if you had a binge Seinfeld over the winter to get ready for Howie. But the thing I want to know is the rule changes. I know that's affected some broadcasters because you usually have more time to tell a story, to make a quip about something. You had these rules in Brooklyn or no?
I did. So I kind of had an idea of what was to come. That was last year. And I remember, part of Noah, we were talking about, how to get ready to take next steps in your broadcasting. I got to a point last year where I felt really confident in my sound, and I would send out tapes to big league broadcasters. And one of the major underlying themes, apart from, some critiques, were, hey, don't feel like you have to jam so much in between pitches, let the game breathe a little bit. And I kept going, okay, all right. And then I thought, wait a minute, they have no idea how much time I have between pitches. It's going to be a rude awakening for some of these older guys that have been doing it for this long in the major leagues, where, there's so much time between pitches in the big leagues. I mean, if you watch a game from last year, it's like, gosh, snails crawling along the street corner. And not, in the beginning, Howie, for the first 10, 15 games, struggled to just get the cadence down quicker. He's like, I'm doing a hockey game. This has all of a sudden become a hockey game. And then you get it. But it was helpful to have that for sure, to just understand the timing, because our job is not just, the clouds are puffy and white. It's to make sure that whatever, as far as I'm concerned, whatever I have to say, I say it in one cohesive line to get it out. I don't like to miss a pitch, and then I'll start another thought as soon as that pitch is done. So that takes practice, and I was lucky to have that in Brooklyn.
Did great, Keith. Thanks again.
Thank you, Sal. Appreciate it.
Anyone else in the room have a question? I know John, when we storyboarded, has a really good question, but anyone else in the Zoom room have any questions for Keith, because he's got to get back to being a dad? If nobody, all right. So John, you will make our nice little segue. We'll start talking about this year's Mets. You have a great question for Keith, so we'll end with our segment with Keith with your question. So go ahead, Johnny.
Well, I just wanted to know, because there have been a lot of people in the media that have never been in the Mets clubhouse this year have opinions on how the Mets clubhouse actually was. I can't think of anybody that's been in the clubhouse more than you. You've been in the clubhouse more than most. So I'm going to ask you, because I'd rather have the opinion of somebody that knows, what was the vibe in the clubhouse like as the season went along? Did you sense that there was a growing kind of malaise that affected the season, or did you think that it was generally a positive room, like the players have been saying, and that it was 100% the play on the field that kind of caused their downfall?
Yeah. So this question, I know that things were said about toxicity of the clubhouse. That, for instance, I interviewed Buck every single day before the game, and I would never bring up something I didn't believe in being a question, even though the fans were talking about it, if I didn't believe it to be true. And I would never talk about the clubhouse vibe. And I think Buck, even on his way out the other day, kind of patted himself on the back, because he handled the clubhouse nicely, which I think is true. Listen, your record is what your record is. But from my experience, to be honest with you, this is my first clubhouse, my first big league clubhouse. Let me know. Let me get back on you with you guys at the end of 24, just so I can compare the two. But one thing that, my job is to absorb and just to kind of feel the vibe and bring that vibe on the air, is that in spring training and into the season, the I don't know if it was a malaise, if it was just these guys were such veterans that kept saying, we'll turn it on when we're supposed to turn it on. We'll get there when we get there. We'll push it when we have to push it. And I think that when you start to struggle in April and in May, and then it builds up, and even in that awful stretch of June, there was always the feeling of, we'll get out of it. I just never thought that the rubber hit the road on that early. And in spring training, I kind of got the vibe like, wow, these guys, it almost seems like they're going to save their bullets until it matters, because last year in 2022, they had their bullets throughout the whole year. They were in first place 170 some odd days and laid an egg late in the year. And so I thought, okay, maybe this is a veteran mindset to just, kind of go along. And then when it's time, boom, turn it on. And I was kind of surprised at that, but I definitely absorbed that. It's 162 games. I mean, Tommy Pham's comments were interesting, but even then you're like, it's not really much here. Everybody works a different way. Everybody has a different routine. Tommy's I would probably liken him to a South Shore construction worker, just like getting his boots on every day, working in the bright and early 6 a.m. to 5 o'clock, but just different than other guys. I don't think the clubhouse was a toxic clubhouse. I never thought that. I never felt that. I just think that it got to a point where these guys were shocked, really shocked that they were playing as poorly as they did. But yeah, from my experience, there was nothing that I'm even holding back now and saying, well, yeah, this was glaring. It wasn't.
No, I agree. And I do take a little issue. I have an issue with Tommy Pham because when he came back in Citi Field, his quote was, listen, things just didn't work out. If we played this season 10 times, this would have been the result only one time.
Right.
Then 2 weeks later is at Yankee Stadium. And here's the other interesting thing that I don't think a lot of people really brought up. So his quote was that he went to Lindor and told Lindor that he's never seen a group of position players, not work that hard. Now, if you boil that down, because then he clarified that by saying, he had no issue with Nimmo, Lindor, and Pete. All right, Escobar is gone. All right, he was one of the other players. Canna is gone. Marte was injured. That only leaves Jeff McNeil. So, what? I don't even get what that quote was about. But then I also did look back. Listen, we know that Tommy Pham has had some issues at other places. There was an interview when Tommy Pham first was playing in the minor leagues, and he said he would get to the majors because all these guys, they just think they're it, and none of them work hard. He knows what it's like to work hard. So I think it's a little bit of a chip on his, shoulder that's made him be able to succeed. But again, you know what? You burn a lot of bridges by throwing people under the bus, and I just didn't think it was the right thing to do. And in reality, it was only Jeff McNeil, if you really analyze the comment, which is kind of strange as well. So, but it is what it is. But Keith, I really appreciate you coming on with us tonight. We're gonna, you can go back and relax with your baby, and now we're gonna have Met Rehab for the next hour and just figure this out, because 6 months ago, this is not what I envisioned, the show to be on the second night of the playoffs. So.
Thank you so much. I'll be relaxing with my baby at 11:30, 2:30, 5:30, 8:30. So guys, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for the support. And a lot of things were the same from 2022 to 2023. If you have to put the blame on me because I was one of the lone differences, that's totally fine.
Never.
Yeah.
Never. We
Thank
love
you for listening.
Also. We'd also love you. We have a Facebook group. It's KINER'S.com. Lots of ex-Mets are in there. It has zero to do with me. The group as a whole, it's not one of those where people just say, "Oh, this guy sucks." It's really intelligent conversation and good stuff. So if you get a chance, we'd love to have you in the group as well.
Thanks, guys. Thanks so much for putting us together.
You got it.
Enjoy the
All
off
right.
season. All right.
All
right. Thank you.
Bye.
All right, Keith Raad. All right, so now we're gonna.
It's interesting that the number of times he says he gets up with the baby is equivalent to the number of times I get up to go to the bathroom.
Nice. All right, so we obviously he's got some time constraints, so we kind of accommodated that, and he was kind enough to give us 45 minutes. So let's talk about the 2023 season. And like I said, it's to me, it's unfathomable that 6 months ago, AJ and I, the first show we did outside of Digital Domain Park, all super excited. What was that? Oh, Clover Park, Port St. Lucie, Tradition. Yeah, in spring training, we had everybody on the Zoom with us. Steve was there in his car. I remember that. I think Steve was one of the first people to pop in the Zoom room.
And
so
your tripod wasn't very good either.
Yeah, it was a garbage can outside of the stadium.
Right.
So let's start off, and we can go around the room, including everyone in the Zoom room. Let's start off with two things we all got incredibly wrong. Thinking back to that, what we were thinking the the season would play out. And I'll go first. I was 100% off on Tommy Pham. I didn't think he deserved to make the team. I thought Tim LeCastro would have been a better, at that point before the roster was made, I said LeCastro will probably make the team over Tommy Pham. I thought he was washed up. And so I was wrong about that. And the other thing that I was tremendously off from, even though I love both of them, with Taijuan Walker and Bassett and Jake, I thought for sure that Verlander, Quintana, and Senga would all have better seasons than Jake and Walker and Bassett. So, and I also thought the Mets would reach the 100-win mark again. So, AJ, what are two things you got wrong?
One, I think I expected more from Brett Beatty. I thought I'd see a lot more development. I think we talked earlier how I didn't want to see Escobar around from the start, give the job to Beatty. I think he blew it. I didn't realize, I thought he was going to take the next step instead of, in some ways, regress. I think the other thing I hadn't factored in fully was the effect of the new rules changes. And it took me a number of months to see, and even I've talked about this, how I think the problem with analytics is it's backward looking, not forward looking, that the analytics department didn't factor in the rules changes, but the roster they had. As we learned through the season, Carlos Carrasco had a problem with the pitch clock, because he would have had it without, because he took time. We didn't see how much the pitch clock would affect Daniel Vogelback's game, Mark Canha's game, how the shift, the absence of the shift would force Jeff McNeil to adjust. It took a long time for him to adjust to the fact that there was no shift this year. So those are two things. I think Beatty's progress, I think he's going to do better. And I really thought there wasn't going to be a great effect on the players themselves with the rules changes.
John, how about you?
Well, I mean, the obvious was that I thought the Mets were going to make the playoffs. I didn't, I thought they were going to be in the wild card and make the World Series from the wild card. But as I think about it, I really thought that the roles of guys like Escobar and Nito would have been more enhanced. Whereas Escobar being that guy who could be the right-handed designated hitter if Beatty took over at third base, I really thought he was going to play a bigger role, but his play did not warrant that. And Nito, with the new rules, I thought, if anything, the new rules were really important to catchers in terms of knowing when to. Now they're going to have to throw over more. Now they're going to have to be more cognizant of holding runners on from the catching position instead of from the pitching position, where they only have 2 disengagements per hitter. So I thought that would have really helped Nito. But again, his play didn't warrant him to play a bigger role. And conversely, I thought the one thing that I thought that Francisco Alvarez would be have the luxury of being brought along slower because of that, but he didn't. And even though a lot of people say, oh, he should have played more and this and that, I was surprised that he played as much as he did. And I was pleasantly surprised that he had as much success as he did getting regular playing time that early in the season. It's really been, I think we all thought Francisco Alvarez was a good prospect, but for him to come close to matching a stat that Johnny Bench had with most home runs under 21, I think that was a huge surprise, and a huge pleasant surprise. We're talking about a lot of unpleasant surprises. That was a pleasant one for me.
Absolutely. Before we close this question out with Noah, does anyone in the Zoom room want to tell us what they got tremendously wrong? All right, Steve, you go first.
So I think that while to AJ's point early on, preseason, he was saying it's an old pitching staff and they're not going to survive it. But I was very surprised that so much in the beginning that they couldn't pitch beyond 5 innings. I was like, what is this? We were doing it last year, and what changed over that time? I think Beatty's another one. We were all screaming for him to be the starting third baseman. But the last thing I was surprised about was that Vogelbach was on the team the entire season, because I truly believed that Beatty was going to come up, he was going to come to third, Escobar was going to slide into the DH position, and that all was going to be happy in Metland, and it just didn't work out that way.
I got to agree with you there. I thought Vogelbach was being set up for a trade, and that trade just never happened. That was another thing I got wrong.
Yeah. Go ahead, Larry. You got on mute, Larry.
What I got wrong was that I thought Uncle Stevie, I still believe Uncle Stevie has his pulse of the team. Every day he knows what's going on. He remained quiet, which I thought he was not going to. He basically let, as far as I'm concerned, Epler mess up the bullpen, and he should have said, you know what, let's get some guys in spring training in here who can pitch. It was so depressing knowing that most games would be blown in the last 3 innings this year. If they won 12 more games, they'd be in the playoffs. I really blame the owner for not really telling Epler, wake up, do your job. You're shuffling guys from the minor leagues back and forth. These guys can't pitch. Let's do something. Let's find some players. That's it.
And Jeff wrote in the chat, he's surprised the batting average were as low as they were throughout the lineup. Agreed with that as well. Noah, what are 2 things you think you got wrong?
Yeah, to kind of add on to that, I kind of didn't expect this little run support that they gave. You know, we had Quintana, we had Senga, all these pitchers pitched amazing and they pitched really well. And what we didn't see was the offensive production from them. We did not see them give them any run support. We didn't really see a lot from the batter's box. So I kind of didn't really expect that, because I did expect at least, 90 wins, something like that. And, obviously when that didn't happen, I was disappointed, but we didn't really see a great effort from hitting. And that's kind of where I was mostly disappointed, because especially you have a guy like Jeff McNeil who batted 326, something like that last year. And he only batted about 260 this year, which is still great. I mean, that's still good, but that's not what we expected from him. And that's kind of where I was mostly disappointed. And also, kind of bring it to social media, I was kind of disappointed on how everybody mostly put the blame on Buck in a sense, because I kind of believe that, he made questionable decisions at times, and I understand that, but it has to come from your players as well. It really does. And I believe that, they put too much pressure on Buck, and kind of what we saw from social media, this whole, fire Buck. And of course, at the end, they did end up firing Buck, but I didn't necessarily think that he deserved all the hate that he got.
Michael,
No, that's incredible. That's exactly right.
Michael?
Yeah. So the things I got wrong was I thought for sure Peterson and McGill were going to be more consistent, and we're going to be able to step into those roles and be the, not the ace, but at least be either the 4th or the 5th or the 3rd or the 4th pitcher on the team. I got that completely wrong. The other thing that I got wrong was stolen from me was McNeil's batting average. I mean, I don't know how he got out of himself, but I expected his batting average to be better than it was. And one other thing I expected, really, I guess maybe this onus is on Buck. I'm going back to the Vogelback issue. I expected Buck to put somebody behind Pete that could protect him. Yeah, he wanted Lindor up earlier in the order, but I think Pete would have been more effective had he had a Lindor behind him, or a Lindor-like hitter. With Vogelback behind him, he wasn't seeing anything. I mean, people should be amazed that he got over 100 RBIs and well over 40, almost 50 home runs, considering they were probably pitching him around him most of the time, but he was recognizing those mistake pitches and hitting them out.
So as long as Noah brought Buck up, let's go there. So I still really haven't processed the whole Buck thing. Listen, I said this on social media. I learned more this season about baseball from Buck Showalter than the last 10 years. There's no doubt that he's one of the most knowledgeable guys in the game. That being said, there are things that I saw in 2 years that, give you pause as to, why Buck wears out his welcome in a number of places and only gets a team to a certain level. One of those things is that Buck is a huge micromanager of everything. I still remember vividly a conversation he had with Met personnel. Major League Baseball has that little camera that sits to the left of the dugout. And that camera is used for, their broadcast or different highlights that they have over the years, and it goes right into the dugout. He was speaking to one of the Mets personnel and saying, I want this camera out of here. And the Met personnel person said, this is Major League Baseball. We can't get this camera out of here. I don't care what you have to do. I want this camera out of here. If the camera's not out of here, I'm going to block that camera every single opportunity. I'm going to put something so they can't see into my dugout. I don't want anyone seeing into my dugout. But there were a number of other instances of little things that I can see, because maybe he's afraid they're going to see something, whatever. But there were other things that just shouldn't be in the realm of a manager. The thing that Buck does exceedingly well, obviously, Lindor loves him. Travis, any player that's ever played for Buck absolutely loves him. That's a good thing. But you know what? It's also not such a good thing. You know what? Managing is not a popularity contest. There are times where you have to make hard decisions and get on a player that they don't listen. I don't know how many people love Billy Martin. I don't. I know that Pete Alonso is sick over the fact, almost to the point where he wanted to go into Billy Epler's office and complain about this. In the end, it's a results-driven business. Didn't get it done. He got it done the year before, but in the end, he didn't get it done. They didn't advance out of the first round. And here's the other thing, and I did post this on social media, because this season, and I think Keith alluded to it, that there was always a thought that at some point they were going to turn this season around, and the talent was there. And you had some historic seasons. Listen, Lindor with a 30-30, unbelievable season, 100 runs scored. Pete, with his 46. Senga with a great year pitching. But here's the reality. This was, and it doesn't feel like this, but this was the absolute worst turnaround from wins to losses in franchise history. Okay. The Mets 29 and a half games out of first place is the furthest they've finished out of first place since 1979. Those are historic numbers, regardless of who the manager is, regardless of what went wrong, regardless of injuries. In the end, someone has to take the fall for that. That being said, the next manager, where they pivot to this, will really finish my thoughts on this. I'm a little concerned that the fact that, Stearns told, I actually asked him, because Stearns delineated a whole bunch of things that as an organization they look for in a player, an individual, a person that works. Then he delineated a whole bunch of items that he wants in his manager. And to me, Buck checked all those boxes on both ends. I asked him specifically which one he didn't check. And
he sidestepped that.
He did sidestep it, but he did. But later on, the word collaboration came in. And you know what? Billy Epler hired Buck because in the end, he wanted someone making the baseball decisions based on, gut and baseball knowledge. The word collaboration to me is management speak for analytics driven. And if it's going to be a first-time manager, with no experience, but knows all the analytics, then I'm going to be, I'm not going to be happy. Obviously he had to sidestep the Craig Counsell question because he's still under contract. And, I think John Heyman asked him because he said he wants to be able to build a relationship with the next manager and he wants him here for a long time. And Heyman said, well, does that rule out Craig Counsell because you've already built a relationship with him? And he said, well, I can't speak about anyone that's under contract, but the fact is, even though if you have a relationship with someone, you can still build on that relationship. So I don't believe Craig Counsell's out. I asked him about Chavez and I asked him about Joey Cora. He said he didn't know a lot about either one of them and didn't speak to anyone on the coaching staff. To me, that means they're both gone. He doesn't know anything about him and hasn't spoken to him. You just fired the manager. I would think that you would take 2 minutes to speak to the staff and let them know, listen, we haven't made a decision. You're under contract. We'll let you know as soon as we can. If you don't want to wait and you want to go somewhere else, let us know. But listen, it's a whirlwind. There's lots of things going on.
Mark,
get it.
let me jump in. What bothers me about the process and the firing of Buck Showalter, I'll get to facts about him as a manager in a second, is that it was done without Stearns sitting down and having a conversation with him face to face. That it was a predetermined decision. If he's going to talk to everybody else in the building, see him build a relationship, everybody down to the guy who cleans the clubhouse, he's going to sit down and talk to them. Why not have that same conversation with Buck Showalter to see if he could build that relationship? If there are things not knowing the guy that he could do. And I think that's what bothers me most about the process and the firing. And it was done almost as a precondition of hiring without him actually having a conversation with the guy and seeing, can I work with him? Is this a guy? And that bothered me. Now, I also think you can't hold the second half of the season against Buck. Once they threw in the towel, once they got rid of the roster, you can't really hold him to the fact they had a bad record, because what was he working with? He was working with quadruple A players. He was working with bum of the day in the bullpen. The guy shows up one night and he's going to bust to Syracuse before he takes a shower at the end of the game. And you can't really hold him to that. Now, the knock on Buck, and you and I talked about this, Mark, is he's not good with young players.
Right.
That when they brought Beatty up, when they brought Alvarez up, when he brought Vientos up the first time, he didn't want to use him. They brought Vientos up and he sat on the bench for a week. And if that was the concern, that you have a roster, we want to build based on your new building blocks, on Alvarez, on Vientos, on Beatty, on Mauricio, maybe that's it. She's not the right guy. But you know what? At least have a conversation with him. That's what bothers me most about the process. Looking ahead, we always used to joke about, even when I worked for Newsday, about doing nationwide searches, for coaches and things like that and jobs. And suddenly the guy who was really your right guy was right around the corner in the office next to us or something. And, they're doing a nationwide search just to come down and Craig Council. We'll see. But New York is a different beast. We've seen what happens when you have managers without experience who have great pedigrees, who were, Philippe Allou's son, right? And, look at that. Look on paper. He looked good, but he couldn't handle New York, had managerial experience. They're going to turn to Carlos Beltran with all the baseball knowledge and analytics. I think they have to find somebody who has some experience as a manager, whether it's Craig Council, whether it's Bob Melvin, whether it's who's going to call it from did the Angels for years. Why am I drawing him? Scioscia, Mike Scioscia. Yeah. Whether it's Mike Scioscia, that's the type of guy I think they need to look for to be able to handle New York.
One of our guys on the Facebook page that follows us, John Newman, threw out a name to me, and it's an interesting name. Again, we don't know a lot about these guys. We don't know what they go through in the interview process, but the name he threw out there is Mark DeRosa. And, DeRosa has a little bit of experience. He coached Team USA in the World Baseball Classic. He's got a little bit of a relationship with Alonso and McNeil because of that. Was well-liked, clubhouse guy in every single clubhouse he's ever been in. Sort of like, back in the day, Joe McEwen was always that guy that was mentioned for these type jobs. DeRosa is now becoming the Super Joe McEwing. This is going, if it's not Craig Council, no matter who it is, listen, it can't be Carlos Beltran. It cannot be Carlos Beltran. I'm sorry. People do not realize, they don't remember when he was here. He was the least stand-up guy in that locker room that Billy Wagner, called him out on it. And people just forget that. He's not the guy. Listen, I don't know who the guy is. Buck was the right guy at the right time, when he took over, brought a little bit of stability here. Was great with the media. I mean, that's also another issue. I think a lot of this outcry is because he was so well liked in the media because he was quirky and he was this old, codgety guy who had all these great stories and would amuse you. But I think you're right. I think when it comes down to it, and I don't begrudge Stearns not having that conversation. Stearns is now the head of baseball ops. If he had in his mind that this was the guy, listen, was it the right way? I think they asked Buck. They let Buck go out on his terms as opposed to firing him. Okay. They could have not said anything. They could have, similar to what the Mets did, the Rangers did with Coach Quinn, breakup day, don't have him speak to the media, and then the next day fire him without him having an opportunity to thank anyone or speak anyone or have that moment with the lineup cards and the players out there. What would have been the right way to do it, AJ? The right way to do it?
I don't
talk to him and then fire him?
Well, I think but to make the decision after talking to him as to before. Stearns couldn't talk to him, before the season ended.
But he knew. He knew.
But why? What was there about Buck?
Because
I have
I
a
think it's
similar
because
situation.
I think it's because Craig Counsell is the manager. I think that's the reason why.
Right. Yeah. And I have a similar situation where I had, and this is just bringing it back to the business world, that I had this relationship in a building where I had a great relationship with the leadership there. And all of a sudden they're gone. Somebody new comes in. They don't know me. They didn't bring me in or my company in. And they never gave us the opportunity to really talk to them or for them to get to know us. They just said, we didn't bring you here. Bye. So I felt like the writing was on the wall in that same vein, that you're bringing in a player of baseball operations. He wants to bring in his people and who he's putting in place, and that it's not a reflection on Buck.
I will say this, Mark, about Buck, and I think back to when Buck was fired by the Yankees and replaced by that retread manager who never went anywhere else, Joe Torre. Everybody thought that was a bad hire.
Right.
That Joe Torre would be far worse than Buck Showalter, who did so well with this Yankee team. And, you can look it up, as they said, look what the history happened. The retread manager, everybody said couldn't win anywhere else, suddenly became this revered Hall of Fame manager with the Yankees. So
the headlines of the Daily News that day of the hire was "Say it ain't so, Joe."
Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely. Don't forget Clueless Sal. Joe from the other tabloid.
Yeah, Sal.
I think that there's no good way to do this. There would have been no good way to get rid of Buck. And if it's not Counsell, then it's stupid not to let Buck do the third year. I agree. Let him see what happens. And if he leads you, great. If not, then you do. But Counsell is your one shot to get him. So that has to be it. I don't want a new manager, guy who's never managed before.
No.
That is an epic fail. And Beltran, please, I've had enough of the guy. Go manage in the minors, build your resume, and then prove yourself. Other than that, but they gave Buck a chance to get that standing ovation. In a crappy situation, that's about as good as it's going to be. And at least they gave him that. And the players,
I agree.
That. And
I agree.
I said before about these guys talking on the radio. Now all of a sudden this talk is like, oh, Alonso wants to go to the Cubs.
To Chicago.
What?
Yeah.
Can I rant on that for a little bit? Because
Yes.
I know a Cubs fan that sent me that article, like, and that Jesse Rogers, who's doing the Brewers series for ESPN, told guys on the radio that Alonso wants to come to the Cubs. This is huge news if it's true. So why am I looking at Jesse Rogers' Twitter account, and why is there nothing on there regarding Alonso wanting to be with the Cubs? If Alonso wanted to be with the Cubs, and if that was true, you don't think that the usual suspects on WFAN would be talking about this 24/7? Oh, Alonso wants to go to the Cubs. Why? Yes, then screw him and this and that. Or what? I don't buy that one bit. And listen, people don't get what nobody's getting. What everybody that just wants to create controversy isn't getting is that Pete Alonso had his contract redone for this past year, for 2023. So it never made any sense for him to sign an extension during the season. Why isn't he signing an extension now? Because he didn't have to. He had the deal for 2023 redone. This is the offseason where it makes sense to get that deal done. Now, if we get to April and there's no deal, okay, we can panic then. But I really think that Alonso is going to re-sign this winter, and everybody's going to calm down. So that's my rant over.
And the
I
same people
agree.
said he was a clubhouse cancer. So
Right,
it's
Right, who've
ridiculous.
never been in the clubhouse. Come
Right.
on.
Oh,
I'll get to you in 1 second, Michael. The interesting thing is, and I agree with you 100%, John, about getting a deal done in the offseason and an extension. And I asked David Stearns that because the two questions I had for Billy Epler when we brought in Senga and we brought in Quintana and we didn't sign Ty Walker and we didn't sign Bassett was, I said, this is a tremendous risk. You let two guys go that prove they can win in New York to bring in guys that are not known commodities. So I asked Stearns, I said, listen, you have a guy here, you grew up a Met fan, you grew up in this market, you know what it takes to succeed here. You have a guy who has succeeded here. Why would you let him go into a walk year with every single day, that being the question, as opposed to locking him up now long-term? And his answer was, well, Pete's proved he can, handle the pressure. So he sidestepped that question as well. I agree with you because listen, this will be an absolute, listen, if we've learned nothing from this market, just someone should send clippings of Islanders / John Tavares to, him right now, because that was just an absolute nightmare. All it was game after game. So John, what's going on? To the wire, and then people begging to keep him and everything that went on with that, just an absolute circus. And if the Mets let a guy who's a homegrown superstar go, just like they did with Tom Seaver, this fan base will not be happy whatsoever. All right, Michael, go ahead.
All right, so I'm going to throw a name out there, but I think, Mark, you may have killed my fantasy with your description of Stearns. The name I'm throwing out there is Wally Backman. Yeah, I know we're all shaking our heads no. But
well, the guy I was going to ask you, Mark, have you talked to Wally?
I think Wally's going overseas. I think that's
I don't think he's going to get it based on the way you described Stearns. I don't think he's going to touch Wally Backman, but I would have liked to have seen the guy at least in their minor league system, because they do have an opening down there as well. But that's my feeling. My feeling is that's what the Mets need, is a fiery guy who's gonna get on these guys, who, as you said, is not going to be their friend. He's going to be their manager.
They have a guy. And he wouldn't check the box of having experience, but he's spent the entire year this year being a bench coach, and it's Eric Chavez. And my fear is that Eric Chavez will become Whitey Herzog. He will go somewhere else, and he will be a very successful manager. I just think he's got a good relationship with players, but he's tough. He's younger. I mean, it's funny. I've had numerous conversations with him this season, and the last time I was there, we had this really good conversation. And it dawned on me. I said, you know what? Is it all right if I just turn on the camera and ask you some questions? And I mean, if you get a chance, go back and listen to that. The guy knows baseball, and he wants to be a manager in the major leagues. I'd hate for him. Listen, Joey Cora is another guy. Obviously, he's like Ron Washington. So well respected by the players. A lot of he works so hard with the young kids. So he's invested in these young kids. I'd hate for both of those guys to go somewhere else, but I have a feeling they will. But if it's Counsell, I'm okay. John, go ahead.
I just wanted to play off that, what you were saying. Do you think that, we've all talked about what changed from 2022 to 2023. Do you think that making Chavez the bench coach instead of the hitting coach, did that have a play in the lower batting averages and the lack of hitting in clutch situations? Do you think that had something to do with it? Because I would subscribe to that.
I asked that question of all the players early on in the season because it was noticeable. Something was different in their approach, but they kind of all, especially Lindor, said absolutely not. They love the hitting coach. They love Barnes. They said it wasn't on Barnes. They said a lot of it had to do with the pitch clock and just they weren't able to adjust to it. And it had nothing to do with whether, because listen, I also asked Chavez, the guys still come over to you and ask, and he said, yes, they'll ask me, I'll see some things. I work with Barnesy. So, Yeah, I think the same thing. When you change a hitting coach and the numbers are that drastic, there's got to be something to it. Other teams adapted to the pitch clock. The Mets just didn't. Yeah, Larry.
No one's mentioned our pitching coach. He was never a successful pitcher in the major leagues. I was a fan of having him gone a while ago. What's your take on that?
For me, I think, listen, I love Hef, but you're right. But you don't necessarily have to be a successful pitcher in the major leagues to be a successful pitching coach. Look at Brett Strom, former Met, what he's done, as a pitching coach. Larry Rothschild, there's a number of Rube Walker. I mean, we could go, lots of guys, there's catchers that are pitching coaches. But what I will say is the biggest guy that had an effect on the pitching staff last year was Max Scherzer. I think Max Scherzer was huge in the development of Ty Walker and Bassett and making them throw pitches, trusting other pitches that they never used in their arsenal. I thought he was huge on that bench. And I even asked Hef, and he said, no, absolutely. I defer to him, which is an interesting comment. But again, I think the lack, like Steve Cohn said, of a pitching lab and things, back in the day, Guy Conti worked with the pitchers. I haven't seen Guy Conti in spring training in 3 years now. He was a big guy. Phil Reagan, they got rid of also. So some of these old timers that were around were instrumental as well. So, and I think you can see less and less of it, with these guys. I think these guys are more analytics, and they're going to work with this pitch lab and work on, more rotation and things like that. It's just so hard to put a finger on all of this. We're just spitballing here, and in the end, it's just, that's why they play the games. This was a year that none of these guys lived up to the back of their baseball card, with the exception of maybe Lindor. So and that's why there are no experts in this game. And that's the one thing I agree with Tommy Pham. You could play that Met season over 10 times, and if you do it in Stratomatic, 10 times, you're going to have ranges between 75 wins and 92 wins. There's no question in my mind. Yeah, Larry, go ahead.
So part of Mets fantasy camp, we have a lot of guys like myself taking pitching lessons from Figgy, from Pulse. I took 5 years of lessons with Pulse, and I can throw strikes now. A lot of guys during these training sessions are throwing strikes, put in the game, 15 walks in 5 innings. And once they're in a mound, things change. So I think a good pitching coach can really get the guys headed to the game. You need to be, I just think for some reason, maybe he wasn't respected. Like you said, Scherzer got the respect of the other guys. Hef did not. And I think that maybe, again, once you get between the lines, all that knowledge can be out the window. So really, it's like a psychological game. You have to really be in the game. And I think you need a coach for that too. I think you need somebody to smack him around and make him really do well. We can't.
The other thing you have to look at, we haven't talked about yet, is the Edwin Diaz effect.
Okay.
That what that really did during the season, it put people into roles they weren't supposed to be in. Adam Ottavino, David Robertson was not supposed to be the closer. He's supposed to be the 8th inning guy. Adam Ottavino was supposed to be the 7th inning guy. And Brooks Raley, the left-handed specialist. And these guys were thrown into different roles that not only weren't they accustomed to, but maybe they weren't suited for. And, so when you do all of that, when you put people in those bad roles, is it the pitching coach's fault? I don't think so. Unfortunately, the way pitching is developed these days, your relievers don't go 2 innings. Goose Gossage would have a 3-inning save. Dennis Eckersley would have a 2-inning save. Everybody says, and the mind says, I'm the 5th inning guy, I'm the 6th inning guy. You move them up, and there's pressure. And I think we haven't talked about what they do. Well, this sort of segues, Mark, I think, into the off seasons where we want to go next. It's hard to say they didn't put a bullpen together, because we never saw the bullpen function in the roles everybody's supposed to function in. So what do they do in the off season? They hope that Diaz comes back. And they look around. I think, I guess they'll take Ottavino back. Raley should come back, and I don't know who else. Who else is out there?
I'm gonna.
Yeah, John.
I want. I, 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 it was too late for the Mets to go out all of a sudden
Yeah.
and get all of these relievers and overpay for them. Everybody was
Right.
saying, well, now go trade for Alexis Diaz. Okay, you have to trade serious capital to get a guy like
Right.
Alexis Diaz. And this regime, the Cohen Epler regime, has shown an aversion to giving away assets for quick fixes. And I think that's a good thing. But where the Mets got exposed is the guys that had to move up did relatively well those first couple of months, but it was made impossible by the starters not being able to reach 5-6 innings. And where the Mets got exposed was where I think they planned on having 1 or 2 bullpen spots be those rotational Tidewater shuffle guys, or it's to go up and down. Right? Yes, Syracuse shuffle now. Now they have 3. And you can't have 3 bullpen slots with shuffle guys. You just can't do it. And I think that's priority number 1, is to get a solid bullpen that you're not shuffling guys up and down. If you have to do that with one spot, the back spot of the rotation, fine, but you can't do that with 2-3 slots. I think that you have to build a solid bullpen, solid depth, so that even when Diaz comes back, and let's say, for example, they do get back David Robertson, or they get somebody else, and they need to stretch out that bullpen long so that they could have success like the Rays did a few years ago, where each and every guy that would come out of that pen would throw 100 miles an hour on the block. I think that's got to be a priority along with beefing up the starting rotation. But that bullpen needs to have length to it.
Guys, 1 second, because I've wanted to do this my whole life. Right? Someone just entered the room. I actually mentioned him about his choice for manager, but I absolutely have to say, hello, Newman. Just had to do it. Sorry. I mean, it fits with tonight. So, all right. So a couple of things. Bullpen. All right. You also, we never touched on the fact that John Curtis got injured again. Montez, the whatever, got injured. And Tommy Hunter made this team out of spring training. Okay. Interesting. Like if we look back in retrospect, that should have been a red flag right there. I love Tommy Hunter as a guy, but Tommy Hunter made this team for a bullpen piece. That's not, and a valuable bullpen piece early on. The interesting thing for me is Joey Lucchesi. I don't understand what the Mets don't see in Joey Lucchesi. He every single time he comes up, he succeeds. And he's one of those guys. We talk about mental makeup. That's what Larry just said about these guys don't throw strikes, this and that. Joey Lucchesi is one of those guys that just continues to figure things out at the major league level. And he's a gamer. And he there's something about him. He's one of those guys you need on the roster. Will he win you 20 games? No. But he's really a valuable piece to a team. And I don't know why he's been so overlooked. But I guess
6 innings after a car crash. That convinced me forever.
Oh, yeah.
About Lucchesi. He needs to have a role on the team next year.
Yeah,
Mark, it's because he's a pitcher, not a speed guy. I mean, he's a guy that can throw that pitch, that'll get the swing and the miss. But he's not gonna overpower you. He's
so like we don't need guys like him.
Maddox than he is.
Okay.
Yeah, but listen.
Hello.
Listen, I'll go back to this story I told a while ago. They interviewed Tom Glavine and said, would they take you? Would you get taken in this day and age? And Glavine said, yeah, because I'm a lefty. But Greg Maddux would not. And that's the shame of it. And I think that's where Lucchesi is sold short, is that he's a pitcher, not a flamethrower. And he's not going to have that glamorous 97
I think what happened with
Lucchesi
pitch was this was a year the questions. You put the best spin on the Mets decision. I agree, Mark. They should have brought him up and kept him there for a while. There was some concern about his durability. And I think they wanted to see some sort of a full season of him being durable. Wasn't that the problem? Is the injury history?
Yeah.
So
he's
maybe
had
now they
injury
see if he
history,
can. What?
Yeah, he had injury history, and but he again, he's a battler. I mean,
But
there's just
that looks ahead for next year. So now you say that maybe they start the year with 3 rotation slots filled with Quintana, with Senga, and with Lucchesi. And that gives them 2 spots to fill, whether through free agency or through some mix of the people we don't really like because they can't seem to put 2 good games together. And that's Peterson and McGill and Budo and these people who sort of make me very nervous when they take the mound.
So I put this out there on social media yesterday, and I got crushed. And listen, forget about the fact that he jilted us, and went with the Dodgers. But Trevor Bauer is a free agent.
No.
Trevor Bauer is a free agent, and people like right away. No, he's a can't. The guy was set up, man. The guy didn't do anything wrong. That's what people don't realize. I mean, listen and read the article. What happened to this guy? And the guy had a great year in Japan. We're all, all over Yamamoto, which is great too. I'd love him too. But listen, I would take a guy who's got a chip on his shoulder and something to prove, right away. What are your guys' thoughts on why is everyone so anti Trevor Bauer?
I didn't know he was not guilty. I thought he was guilty. I had no idea.
No, totally set up.
I thought there were other things.
Bauer was a head case in the locker room.
Yeah. Noah Syndergaard.
Well, let me toss
Matt Harvey. Matt Harvey.
Well,
no, but there's a number
There's
of
your
guys
answer. There's your answer.
No, but there are guys that are head case that are good pitchers. I mean, Max
That's the
Max
difference.
Scherzer.
Let me toss another name at it. Seth Lugo.
No, not for me. I think Seth Lugo, his numbers were a lot different prior to the sticky stuff. His numbers have come down a bit. He's a serviceable pitcher, but he's also got an injury history. He's up there in age. I mean, AJ, you're the guy. You were right.
I'm the guy, I want younger pitchers.
You were dead on with Scherzer and Verlander. I don't want to go down that road. I don't want anyone signed over 31 years old if you're going to start putting guys in
Scherzer,
the rotation.
Verlander, and Carrasco. It was just they had so much on the rotation, and then Quintana got hurt.
Yeah,
right.
No
but
problem.
I still wouldn't have. I still would have done everything exactly the same with Scherzer and Verlander, especially since it got them good prospects.
No, I agree. I agree.
I thought it was the right move at the right time. But yes, now
Addition,
with all the new rules, I think
It's
you got to get younger and more athletic.
Right.
Of the 5 or 6 starts so far this year, I thought Budo was really good. He's got a beautiful split finger. He was impressive at the end of the year. I would say he's a keeper. Just my opinion.
Yeah,
Since
again.
Since it's the last show of the season, I want to kind of turn it around on you guys and ask you, what has it been like this season? And we talked about it with all these stories and everybody trying to be first, and they're all a bunch of BS, right? It's just all conjecture and stuff thrown out there. And you got people commenting left and right and probably even asking you about it. How does that affect your jobs in terms of actually being able to deliver the truth and deliver it in a way that people are going to be engaged in it and not just the sensationalistic stuff that you see day to day?
Can I take
Mark,
this first?
let me take that for a second.
Yeah.
What I think has differentiated what we've done, Mark and I have done with John, who's been with us the whole time over the years, is to try and separate us out with Sports Talk New York and what we're doing now as intelligent, not knee-jerk, step back and have real discussion and not shouting. And I think because that's just what we've done for so many years, I think we were able to do it this year, to not knee-jerk to everything. Look, I was the deputy sports editor at Newsday in the middle of the New York newspaper wars of the 90s, when we had, the Daily, and we were competing against the Daily News and the Post and everybody else, and you have to run it. I know what it's like to have the pressure of stories and to some extent bullshit stories. try and carry the conversation, and sports talk radio has only made it worse. But I think what we were able to do to answer your question, which is what we've been doing for, was it 15, 16 years, Mark?
Yeah, 18,
and-
18.
And you know, and keep up and understand that our job is to separate, to use the cliche, the wheat from the chaff, and not knee jerk.
John, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, social media, sports talk radio makes it so much harder to kind of break through and kind of calm everybody down and say, look at what's happened before. Look at the patterns. Look at the context. I think we lose a lot of context when we deal with people that are just trying to search for sound bites and search for talking points. I think we lose a lot of that context. And I think that's what we've tried to, like AJ said, we've always been trying to do it. We've always been trying to bring a little context into everything. You know, I think in so many aspects of just sports media has changed. I think that announcers in general, the ones that I listen to regularly that aren't Gary, Keith, and Ron, they're not announcing to bring you the game so much as they're announcing for sound bites. And I'm talking about out of market and national announcers. Like they're not announcing to give to where their goal is, hey, I hope I painted a picture for the audience. Their goal is to, hey, I want to get picked up by awful announcing. I want to get picked up in a tweet for something I say. And there's a lot of that going on. And I commend us for not changing and not pandering to that. You know, and I think that's what we just try, but we also try to have fun with it. We also try to have fun and bring about different angles of things and different perspectives. But like I said, because a lot of times context gets lost, and I think that's where we've all gone. That's where everybody's gone wrong. And I think we try to kind of steer away from the sensational and just bring everything with a little perspective and a big picture, as it were.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that. So, all right. So at times, I'll be perfectly honest, it's frustrating. Because I think we have something that's somewhat unique. I don't know how many different, websites or fan pages or Facebook groups have the ability of people coming in each week and speaking to, a former player, an announcer, things like that, and getting really intelligent conversations. Obviously, we're in a world of social media, and to try and promote the show, I've joined like 12 different Met groups, and like I put it out there today. Like, I really wanted to thank, first and foremost, everyone that's in our group. If you take a look at the postings, it's not the nonsensical, let's trade this guy for Juan Soto, or this guy sucks. It's intelligent, it's fun, it's thought-provoking, and that's a tribute to you guys that, tell your friends about it. But then you go to these other ones where they have 7,000, people in their group, but we don't want to be that. I'd rather have the 1,300 that are smart, intelligent, and don't come on here and say Baba Booey and stupid stuff like that. So other than the actual, record this season, it's been a blast, and I have to commend. I texted John directly. John is. He is the MVP of the group. I think he probably did like 70 of the game recaps, and we're not a huge organization, so like the graphics, or like whoever's gets the KINER'S Corner seat, I have to do them, and a lot of times, sometimes you're not there. But John, he did it, and he put a whole bunch for the next day, whoever was covering the story, and that's been fun though. I mean, trying to find different little nuggets to put out there in the game stories, the recaps, and we're in a group text figuring out like who should get the seat tonight. And like you kind of almost feel like it was back in the day, like you're the executive producer of KINER'S Corner, or who we getting to be the post game guest. It's a little sad that this is the first season and it's over, but We will be doing like a monthly show with Scott. Scott did 2 or 3 shows, and I know we were going to try and do that monthly, but with all the things that were Met centric, we didn't want to take away a week from talking about the week. So we're going to rebrand his show, and we'll do that once a month during the off season. Obviously, season 2 doesn't mean we're going to wait till opening day. As things come up, if there are trades or there are other things, we'll pop on, we'll do shows. The content, I'm going to put out there tomorrow what people would like during the off season. I think first and foremost, I think each day we should just put up, a Met from this season's roster and get everyone's thoughts on a grade, and what you thought, and just get the people's thoughts on that. There are things we've tried, the crossword puzzle, the Wordle, things like that. We want the site and the group page to be your guys, your landing place for Met stuff, and he give you guys what you want. I mean, AJ and I have 17 years of interviews. Of those 17 years, from the sports talk shows, there's so many archives of the 69 Mets, the 86 Mets, former Mets. We might pop one up there once a week just as an archive, like Bud Harrelson, Jerry Kuzman, things like that for people to listen to.
Let me ask a question. You raised something more. Ask the guys out there in the room. 2 things that I worked on this year. One with John Coppinger, occasionally dumping 2 guys talking Mets. I had a lot of fun doing that with John.
I love those.
And
I love those.
And I was hoping you guys read it and saw it and think what you thought about that. And the other one was the crossword puzzle. And I have been as Mark knows, a crossword puzzle freak for, since I was a kid. I've done competitive crosswords. I never tried creating a crossword, and it's hard. It is really hard. Each crossword probably took me 8 to 10 hours to create, but I enjoyed doing it. Did any of you try it? And do you have any suggestions? So those 2 thoughts start to the room. What do you think either one of those things? I in particular worked on the 2 guys talking Mets, which John and I had a lot of fun with, and the crossword puzzle.
Yeah, I loved reading the 2 guys talking Mets. That was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun and made me smile, and something positive to read on the internet.
Yeah.
So we'll put stuff out there on the page just to get us through the winter. It's interesting because I could have covered the Islanders again this year, and I realized that this was exhausting at times. It was making sure out of all of us who was covering the game, make sure it was up there, get it out on social media, get some content. Thank God they were because they were bad, I was able to put the pennant race between the 73, the 92, and the this year's Mets. And it was really cool looking at some of the old articles from 73 and 92 as the season progressed. Interestingly enough, so we're short 1 game, and I didn't, as long as I have AJ and John here. So I have a draft of that Marlins game. But now what do we do? I mean, that game is now officially a Mets win, and they won it 1-0.
So stop the recap at 1-0.
It's the most bizarre thing. It's the most. It's a good thing the Mets beat now technically, since that win got awarded, was it today or yesterday? Is that technically Buck Showalter's last win, or does it go by the date of that game? It's interesting.
I think it works the same as rainouts that were completed, whatever that rule is. I think it goes to that date. So no, I don't think that's Buck's last win.
What's different? 1-0 means it's considered a forfeit. Am I right?
No, 9-0 is a forfeit.
9-0. It just reverted to the last completed inning, which is why the Mets won it 1-0.
So, 1-0. Yeah, okay. I forgot.
But I believe the stats from the 9th inning count, correct?
No,
Oh, they don't. Okay.
Anthony K's ERA is saved.
There you go. Could you imagine if someone hit 57 straight games in the 9th inning? If that 9th inning hit was a 57 straight game. Wow.
Well, then I think the Marlins would have wanted to come back.
Yeah.
And finish the game just for that.
Guys, I just want to thank you guys. Steve and Sal. You go ahead, Sal.
Yeah, I just wanted to say what a pleasure this has been for me to go back in time with Rosie and have, to meet you guys. You guys are awesome. And just to be able to do what I felt I was born to do when I was 20 years old, What a great time I've had. Rosie, you got to do at least during the GM meetings. Got to do it during.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
We got to do more of these, even though it's.
Oh yeah.
We'll
No,
have-
Come do
no.
a show at Fantasy Camp.
No, it's
Hot,
interesting. No,
hot
we
stove,
just
Mark. Whenever,
No,
whenever
absolutely,
there's
no.
a rumor out there.
no
That's-
question. No. So this is just because the season's over. This we try to figure out like season one. This next show will just be season two. I mean, there's not. We're continuing this. I think there'll be a couple of weeks where we don't do it. I'm actually going to look to see where the winter meetings are. I might go down to the winter meetings this year. December 1st, usually the December 1st. I have to look. I might go down. Maybe John, you want to go?
I wish I could.
Where are they?
I don't know. I don't know where they are this year. They're usually
looks like
Nashville.
Nashville, Tennessee, December 4th through 7th.
So maybe I'll go. We'll see. But yeah, we'll do shows then. I mean, we'll do shows. I just don't know. We'll have to figure out like content, like for the articles on the page. Listen, people get so hung up on content, that they just put up, stupid like Pete Alonso wants to go to the Cubs articles. We're not going to do that. We'll have content on the Facebook page where people can interact, and when things come up, I'm sure there'll be a lot of two guys talking over the year.
Yeah.
I think we're also probably going to revamp staff a little. So a lot really fell on John. I think John did like 70 games. Arnie probably AG did probably like 35. I think I did like 35. That would be over. No, yeah, and
Yeah.
Then Jim Cern. Yeah.
Oh,
so,
no.
by the
no,
way,
yeah, no, I did a good number of them.
If I'm the MVP, then I'm like the Zolio Versailles of MVPs.
see, that's the beauty because of our age
There's
demographic.
a
Everyone knows who
player
it is.
who Keith Rat
There's
had
a
no
name.
idea knowing who that is.
Wasn't he a shortstop?
He was a shortstop.
Minnesota,
yes.
Minnesota Twins.
Wins.
Won the MVP with 19 home runs.
As George would say, I'm out of here.
That's it. Good night, everybody.
Good night. All right, guys, have a great night. Listen, we do also have to do this to keep our minds off of. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on, man, but there's some crazy crap going on in our country. So we need to talk baseball instead of all the other noise that's going on out there.
Agreed.
And again, I just want to thank you guys. You guys have been great. You've been loyal. You've been showing up. And like I said, you guys ask better questions than we do. So it's really been a pleasure doing this every week. So we'll see each other soon for sure. So have a great
A lot
one.
of
And
fun.
We'll see you in the
for
winter.
sure.
You
You
bet.
got it, guys. Good night, everybody.
All right. Good night.
All right. Bye-bye.